I think we're stuck in that. I think we're stuck in an archaic mentality of if a leader steps down or if a leader is no longer physically able to lead their country, then somehow that's a weakness that reflects on the country itself, and that's a really stupid way to think, because it's the more responsible. I'd be more scared of a country that responsibly, as its leaders, like choosing to step down and putting someone they think is capable in their place. Like that seems a more capable, forward-thinking, dangerous country. I mean, because they're thinking of the future and they're not thinking of like how they look on the world stage.
Yeah.
Well, which
I see that.
Well, it's funny to me that I mean, and I agree with you, but it's funny when you think about it, because we have never been in a time where people are more tied into their emotions and what people think and how people feel, and what's call it the pulse of the nation, than we have, I mean, really in ages. But to your point, yeah, thinking that a president would, surrender or quote unquote abdicate the throne is, I mean, kind of unheard of, for this country. But there's also a point where
it's just because George Washington set that precedent. I mean, like literally, he was, we joke about there's, video game DLC, the tyranny of King Washington, like a what if historical scenario where if, had he decided, because they wanted to make him president for life, and he said, nah, we're not doing that. We just got over that. We're not doing this now. Yeah. So, I mean, he politely said 2 terms, I'm good. I did my time and I'm out. And that kind of just became the gentleman's game until FDR hung around too long. And then, like I said, then they realized, we can't have, presidents dying in office like this. So
maybe that's the fundamental problem, is that politics on the whole are no longer a gentleman's game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was people there was a time where people that went into Congress or went into our Senate went away from their private lives for 2 or 4 years, and it was a sacrifice. It was a true sacrifice. They went away from their business or whatever land holdings they had or whatever, and they went and they did this job for 2 or 4 years, and then they quit, and then they came back and went back to their regular lives, and it was considered an honor to do that. And now we just have people that are career politicians that do nothing but they spend their time enriching themselves and enriching their friends, while the rest of us, I mean, and let's be honest here, I'm not hurting, I'm not poor, but I'll tell you what, I look at what I pay in taxes and what I get in return, and I'm like, fuck. Like, it's nothing. The street in front of my house is covered in fucking potholes, and I'll tell you what, I pay my goddamn taxes. So I don't want to do it. But term limits. It's for everything. Every single office, from dog catcher to president, should have term limits, because there's always going to be somebody that can come in that has fresh ideas and has fresh gripes and and just a fresh mentality. And we've got too many people that are between 80 and 90 years old in the Senate and our Congress, and the few and far between people that come in that are young and do have fresh ideas, they come in and they're just battered up against a wall, and they're told either play by the rules or we'll oust you, And I mean, fundamentally, anybody that does not want to play by the rules either is silenced and you never hear from them, or they're drummed out, And then, like anything else, there's always a few bad apples that do whatever the hell they want, and it's, nice to see that at least between the Senate and Congress as a whole, they're starting to take some action, and they're starting to, expel some of the bad apples, because there's people that just, they don't care about people. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about how our country was founded and what it was founded on, and what the goal of a government is. All they care about is their own personal achievements and, like I said, enrichment.
Yeah, and they also I think when you see that change, especially, I'm using FDR as, I guess, the time where they had to say, okay, presidential terms must be a thing now. But also with the turn of the 20th century, with the advancements in travel, and also the advancements in technology and information, what we're seeing now is the celebrity or the celebritization, I guess, of politics. And that's, like Brent was saying, that wasn't a thing before. Like, it was a sacrifice. You had to leave your farm in Tennessee and go to Washington by carriage, and spend your time there and all that stuff, and then go back to your family and your estate and to relax and all that stuff. Like, you were actually making a sacrifice. You couldn't make a day trip and hop on your private jet and just, make a day trip to Washington and sit in and halfway fall asleep during somebody's speech you don't give a shit about, and then make your day trip back home. Like, it wasn't like that. And I'm also scared where I think there's going to be like the next generation of politicians, like young people, who probably do, like I said, have good ideas. And like I said, I'm a millennial. I'm in the weird in between set where, I don't know who I guess represents me in Congress, but like, just the thought of there's going to be a generation now who only looks at the way you get into office is a popularity contest. It will be by your actual visual presence too, on whether it be social media, whether it be, like, you have to make yourself, like I said, I'm using the word like celebritization as an example, but you have to almost make yourself something worth people wanting to follow and things like that for you to get traction and stuff like that. And that's kind of a scary premise, because you're probably gonna have a lot of people who are really good at that and then might be really terrible at the actual job, or vice versa. You might have, like I said, it might be unfortunate that some voices might not get heard that are actually, out for the best, and maybe have an actual old school, like, political kind of upbringing or background studies and everything, but aren't ever going to get heard because they just aren't flamboyant enough. They're not. They don't stand out.
Well, it's interesting. I know in the last election cycle, I actually, and this had not happened to me in years, I actually had somebody that came, and granted they're running for the local school board, but came and knocked on my door and said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'd appreciate your vote." And I was in the middle of something. I got interrupted. My dog was barking, and I'm like, "Lady, tell me why the hell I should vote for you." And she's like, "Well, because I've done this, this, and this. I plan to do this, this, and this." And she's like, "What do you think about the schools around here?" And I was like, "Well, I think they're basically preparatory academies for prison." And she's like, "Oh my God, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, so my daughter graduated from the local school system in 2019, but she spent the last 2 years of her high school doing PSEO at a local college because the school was so bad, I didn't want to send her there anymore." I mean, the last volleyball game my daughter had there, we walked out the front and there was a fight going on in the front, like, not the lobby, but they call it the rotunda of the school. There was a fight going on, and I went back inside and said, "There's kids out here fighting. There's like 10 of them." And the people in the school were like, "Nothing we can do about it." And I'm like, "You're kidding me, right?" And anyway, so this lady spent 15 minutes talking to me and went point by point with what she's already done. She was seeking re-election, what she'd already done, what she intended to do. And finally, I'm like, "Tell me something." I said, "When do we stop busing in kids from troubled areas? And when do we start holding kids accountable? If you fuck up, you're out. See ya." And she's like, "Well, every kid deserves a chance." And I'm like, "Explain to me why that is. Explain to me why every kid deserves a chance. And if they do, how many do they deserve?" And she's like, "Well, I had this program, and it's kind of like, I kind of look at it like baseball. It's like 3 strikes, you're out." And I'm like, "Well, okay, what defines a strike?" And I guess my point is this. She went through all of this, and didn't placate me. She wasn't doing that. She wasn't telling me what I wanted to hear. She was telling me what she thought she could accomplish. And in the end, I ended up voting for her. So, I mean, to Clark's point about how trying to be a celebrity and trying to get your name out there. And I mean, I'm sorry, people of the world, if you get your news off of TikTok or YouTube, you're a fucking moron. Okay? You are. Sorry. It's just what I think. There's so much happening in the world, and most of it has nothing to do with who's popular. Most of it the things that we see, and I've said this before and I'll say it again because I firmly believe this. Most of what you see on the internet is a distraction. So A, you don't hate your life and you keep doing what you're doing and you stay a cog in the machine. And B, so the politicians in Washington can keep getting away with the same bullshit they've been getting away with for the last 40 fucking years and nobody notices. You know, I work at a place that has government contracts. Okay. What I can tell you is that there are so many agencies in the government that all do the same thing, and you have to adhere to all their rules. And then to make themselves different, they'll create a new rule or they'll phrase it differently. So you have to abide by contract A and contract B from two different agencies, although they're 99.9% the same. I know the new jobs numbers just came out and it's like, oh, the jobs numbers blew away expectations. Well, dig into those job numbers and see how many of them were government jobs. Okay. So growing our government is not how we continue to grow our economy. It is the opposite of growing our economy. All we're doing is growing how much tax we need to pay for more government workers. So I'm going to get all fired up and go down a rabbit hole that I'll just end up pissed. But anyway, when it comes to our politicians, you know, I'm going to step all the way back and I'm going to say, I don't like Joe Biden. I don't like anything he's done. I think he's a miserable fucking president. I feel bad for what his party is doing to him. I think he needs to be allowed to step down and not have it be seen as a sign of weakness. It needs to be seen as a sign of dignity, and we need to move on from there. Now, letting Kamala Harris be our president, then that scares me even more, to be perfectly honest, because she does not know what the fuck she is doing. She is the most clueless politician I've ever seen in my life. But I would take that over watching Joe Biden continue to be pushed into the spotlight in what I think is the most undignified manner I've seen in a long time.
Well, to all of that, and to Clark's point about the celebrity thing, it's yeah, I for a while I've kind of felt like there's an end date to whatever this is, or at least that I, you know, I mean, I'm younger than both of you guys, but this whole thing we grew up with, I don't know if it's going to really last. I mean, I've just like had so many personal encounters with people much younger than me. And I'm like, I don't really see it playing out too good when there's rungs of power that need to be filled. Because you'll have like it'll be like the whole popularity contest versus the small majority of people that were like really disciplined or trained in something or have really good ideas of what we already have and just stripping it down to its operating parts. I don't really see that panning out. I just see it getting worse, to be honest. So I don't know.
Well, I'd said I worked with this girl about, gosh, it's been a while. She's still friends with one of my best friends, so I see her every now and then, like out at like events and stuff. But we used to work together, and she's about 10 years younger than me, and I remember breaking her heart. I'll never forget the look on her face when she was, we both were working, doing stuff, obviously, for the federal government, Department of Justice, and things like that at the time. As I've mentioned on the show before, so it's not like a big secret. But we were talking, and she, I don't remember how the conversation started, but she basically she was being real pro-America, and she was just saying, this is the greatest country ever and all that kind of stuff, and the greatest country in the world and everything. And I just kind of like nodded and was like, yeah, okay. She was just like, not mad at me or anything, but she was just like, you don't think this is like the greatest country in the world? And I said, no, it's not that. I said, I'm just a jaded history major, and I spent an entire high school through collegiate career studying civilization's rise and fall. And I can't possibly believe that we're going to do something that no civilization in the history of man has ever done, which is stick around forever. And that's literally just the truth of the matter. So, whether you think that's in another 100 years or whether you think that's in another 10 years, that's maybe up for debate. You could probably point out some things, but I mean, the truth is the truth. Like, it's not going to last. That is the end all be all of it.
Yeah. And then you got a bunch of other things to like pile on. You've got our monocrop agriculture has a ticking date where we have so many decent seasons. So I've heard. So the quote experts say that we have like what in between 40 and 50 seasons of before crop, like massive crop failure. I mean, it doesn't affect my dirt. I can grow whatever I want, but like in terms of the farms that have been reusing the same soil over and over and over and using various fertilizers, I don't know if you have more and more of an undisciplined, clueless population moving into modes of power, and then you have like what you've talked about, Grindhouse, where like more and more everyone's like kind of concerned about their point of view and like whether or not their like the individual's comfort comes before like most things now. And then you add like just one like really crazy thing, like total crop failure in the North American continent. I don't know. I'm just prepping. That's all I know to do.
Well, here, I'll say a really unpopular thing here, and once you get in, you put your editing hat on, I'll let you decide to do with it. The reality of things today is that everybody cares far more about themselves, and we're all guilty of it in one way, shape, or another, and to a different degree. But everybody cares way more about themselves and their own personal outcome than they do about this country. Now, I'm going to tell you what, I've got patriotism coming out of my ass. Okay, I will strap myself to a Scud missile and follow it wherever it needs to go. If it's in the name of fucking patriotism, I will do it. Okay. Young people that live here now that are bitching up and down, and they spend all their fucking time complaining, and they're blocking highways, and they're doing all these things. They have no fucking concept of the fact that because we live in the freest country on the earth, that they don't get shot for their behavior. They have no concept of that. And everybody just bitches and bitches and bitches about equality. I'll tell you what, never in the history of this country have things been more equal than they are right now. The difference is people are, when they bitch about equality, what they're talking about is equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. Okay? Right now, the equality of opportunity is more parallel than it has been in this country's entire history, possibly in this planet's entire history. Now, the opportunity of outcome is based solely on the individual and the amount of effort that they're putting into it. Now, when I just saw a news story, and it was talking about to the different generations and how much money the different generation needs to make per year to be happy and to have their needs met. So my generation, the Gen Xers, all said, well, you know, if my family had about $125,000 a year, we'd be comfortable, bills would be paid, you know, we'd be happy. We could take a vacation once a year, you know. The millennials all said that they needed $500,000 or more per year to be happy and to have all of their needs met. Okay, so I don't know where the fuck these people came up with that number, but how is it 5 times higher than my generation? It doesn't make any sense. What is it that you're doing with your time and your money that you need so much of it? When I know that most of you waste your time either complaining on the internet, watching other people complain on the internet, or some combination of the two. You're not doing anything more constructive with your life. You know, I mean, as I've said, I'm comfortable. I can do what I want. I have all the toys I want. I can go and have fun and you know, do the things that I want to do. But in terms of just being a person and being a member of this society and the reality of, guess what? I don't get to spend every waking minute of my day doing exactly what I want. Okay? I don't even get to spend 10% of my day doing what I want. I spend part of it sleeping because I have to, otherwise I'll die. I spend part of it going to work because I have to, otherwise I'll be poor and have no place to live. I spend a good portion of it doing chores, cleaning my house, because otherwise I'll live in a fucking shithole and I'll have dirty clothes. You know, so, but I don't think these people realize a lot of this thing. And a big reason why I think it's not scientific or studied or anything is because millennials on the whole, and I'm talking the millennials I know and that are kind of on the lower end of things, are lazy as hell. They've had everything handed to them, And as soon as they're put in any situation where they don't get what they want, they scream and bitch and cry and just go, oh, life's not fair. It's some sort of, it's racism or it's homophobic or it's this, that, or the other goddamn thing. And it's like, maybe what it is just you not getting off your ass and taking care of yourself. And I don't understand why people see that as such a hill to climb, because it actually isn't that hard. Okay. You have to make choices and you have to make good choices. And you know what? There was a time in my life where I couldn't afford a fancy TV or I couldn't afford a fancy car. I bought a piece of shit car so I could get to work, you know, and I fixed it when it broke down. And I've been doing that I've been in the workforce for 37 years now. Okay. So, you know, I'm at a place where I believe that I've earned the right to have it be a little bit easier. Okay. Now, should it be easy? No. There's days I get up and I don't want to go to my job. I don't want to go and spend 10 hours in an office, you know, cranking out what I crank out so some big corporation can make money. But that's where I found my place. So, and, you know, if you have found your place at McDonald's, well, unless you want to be the manager or you want to own the place some days, guess what? It's probably not going to be enough because it's a $2 hamburger that company is trying to sell me. So I know that. So take some time to take some stock in yourself and look ahead a little bit and invest a little bit of time into making yourself better instead of complaining about what you don't think you have, or even worse, what you think you're entitled to.
Yeah, you were talking about earlier about the amount of, well, the expectation of like what would it take for, I don't know, what were you saying, for that generation to be happy, or just like what they expect is like a normal income?
To quote unquote be happy and to get by, you know.
Oh, to get by. Well, I'm between the three of us, we should know a little bit about like economics. I'm curious, between the two of you, like, I've always, the argument against something like going to precious metals based currency like we used to is like the banker people will say it's not scalable per population or whatever. And then you and me, Clark, have talked about how it kind of seems like this idea was peddled to politicians back in the day, and then the gold that underpinned our nation was basically bought up by private interest once everything was swapped over to fiat. So I'm curious if either of you think that would ever be a possibility of underpinning currency to something tangible. Because personally, like, you know, if you have a system where the Treasury Department makes a big beautiful IOU that says U.S. Treasury bond, and then that's being sold as an investment to print more money and on the promise of return. That seems, I mean, I guess like it's designed to last for a while, but I think we're starting to see the issues with it peaking up. Like the runaway inflation is one thing. Like I looked up yesterday on the inflation calculator in 2017. We've lost 25 cents on the dollar from and that's like a massive amount. If anyone is holding any significant amount, and the bank's interest is nothing, that's just so crazy to me to think that if you have a pile of cash between those 2 years, or excuse me, those few years, that there's that much loss. Anyway, I just would love I never hear anybody else's opinion on this kind of thing. Hey, there we go.
Well, yeah. I mean, first thing I think is, now this is, like I said, this is your local historian's opinion on the matter. If there's a catastrophic failure of any kind of economic breakdown, or like I said, as we jokingly say it, Western civilization falls, the first thought to go to having something that must be of value to someone else who still has a stable economy, in which case silver, gold, things like that. But rare metals are not rare anymore. I mean, they're just not. Like, we're talking about standards of wealth based on a time when these were harder to come by, harder to mine, I mean, even with the Golden Fleet, which we'll get into next week and stuff like that, and you'll see like what they were doing to mine the silver in Peru and send it all the way back to Spain. And that's a show of wealth because, you know, certain metals were a status symbol just to have. You know, but in some parts of the world that it might not mean anything to it. It might be stuff they pick up off the ground. But we're also, like I said, at a point where silver, gold, things like that are no longer rare. We have put that value on them historically. So yes, early on, maybe that is a thing where if just let's do a hypothetical where like, okay, quote unquote, Western civilization falls, say super volcano goes off or whatever, and we've broke down economically. And if you have silver and gold or something you can base that back on, then maybe now you can trade with countries like China who would still have a functional, you know, economy that base their stuff in silver and things like that. So you can maybe do things like that. But ultimately, if we went into like apocalypse mode where like the world has gone to shit, honestly, we're going to revert immediately back to the things that mattered most to survive. It's going to be iron, it's going to be copper and brass, it's going to be tin, you know, well, tin and copper to make brass, basically. It's going to be lead. I'm going to want the thing. I mean, I always said that the currency of the future is 22 LR because that's what
dude, after that conversation, whenever I'm on that side of town where I get my ammo from, I always get those like a couple of those 100-round sleeves. I'm just like,
a little CCI sleeves.
Clark's right.
Yeah, that's, I mean, because you'll get whatever you want. If you got a bunch of that and Western civilization does fall, I'm telling you, 22 LR, you can get whatever you need. If it's your tobacco, if it's whatever, you know, like we'll be literally bartering on that stuff. So,
Well, okay, so I obviously respect what you say a great deal, Clark. But I'm going to respectfully disagree with you that we will immediately go back to that. I don't have a time frame, but I don't think it's going to be immediate. I think there's going to be a time where cash will still have some value because it's intrinsic in our society and you can't get away from it. Once people run out of toilet paper, cash will have another value. And then not too long after that, I think we'll fall into the, you know, call it the cycle of the precious metal where people are trading silver and gold. But then that will inevitably, I think, collapse too. And then to your point, it's going to be, you know, it's going to be something in the ammo trade. But then even with that, because I think that if, call it just the Western society falls and the rest of the country is just watching us kill each other, you know, over whatever it may be, there will be a point where the people that are going to be, you know, become the new grand poobah of whatever part of the country or whatever town they're in are going to be the people that can supply shelter, food, clean water, and protection, you know, under whatever umbrella. You know, it's the umbrella of a militant society or under the umbrella of a peace-loving beatnik society. It doesn't matter. That's what's going to be, you know, the coin of the realm is going to be, get me as close to what I had before. That's what it's going to be. But all things being equal, I do agree with you. I'm definitely in the, if it's got brass and lead, I'll put it on my shelf sort of philosophy because I think it's safe.
What was that? What was that tiny little block civilization that rose up in Oregon? What was it called? It was this Chaz. Was it Chaz? Where it was like they blocked it off and they didn't want any fascists in there. It was it? No, maybe it was Seattle. It was either Seattle or Oregon.
It was called CHOP. Yep, and it was in Seattle. Yep, and it was in Seattle.
It immediately became a war zone.
Yep, exactly.
Like immediately, the people that were like, we don't want fascists here, were the ones that like had guns and were imposing their will on everyone else. I mean, it was insane. I remember watching that.
When I used to visit there, that literally was like a block away from literally where I stayed.
Wow.
Like it was, that's insane to think about. I mean, because it's right there near where the university is. So,
what did the mayor call it? Their summer of experimentation and love or whatever. the
Yeah,
mayor that was in charge
most of my in-laws are in Seattle, so I have
Okay.
I have firsthand experience of. So there's a park in Seattle, and my wife laughs at me because I can never remember the name of it. But it's a beautiful park. It has this great water fountain that flows down several tiers. It's just beautiful. And one year we were visiting, my oldest and his girlfriend were with us, and we were in this park meeting up with my brother-in-law, because at the time, this was before I was a big vinyl collector, but my son's a big vinyl collector, so we were going to go check out some record stores and just walk the city. So just that summer, the city had spent and just an exorbitant amount of money putting in a soccer pitch for the kids. So the kids had a place to go out and, play soccer and hang out. Well, at this park, the entire soccer pitch was covered in tents, just absolutely covered in tents. You walk through this park, there's drug needles everywhere. I mean, like you watch where you're walking because there's so much paraphernalia laying around. And we encountered a homeless guy who was, and I'm not judging for the record, I'm just telling you what I saw. People have mental illnesses, drug problems, whatever. I'm a little sympathetic to that. So there's no judgment here. I'm just telling you what I saw. So this guy is walking around this park with a shopping cart and he's talking to himself. And every once in a while, he's pulling up a glass meth pipe and he's going on this meth pipe. And then he stops and then he pulls out a one hitter for marijuana and he uses that a little bit. And he's walking around and then he stops and he just starts screaming and he digs into his cart. He's digging at something and all of a sudden he's smearing this brown stuff all over his face, this sludgy like brown stuff. Okay. Well, my first thought was probably what you're both thinking right now. And it turns out it wasn't that. We were able to get closer and see him, and he, from some place, had gotten himself, I guess you'd call it a flat, like from a grocery store, a saran-wrapped flat of chocolate frosting. And he was opening the cans and eating it, but smearing it all over his face, all while screaming at the sky. And it was like, okay.
Sounds like a religious experience.
It was a let's get the fuck out of here experience. I just could not believe it. But I mean, if you look at that city, like I said, my in-laws live there. I mean, you want to have an interesting conversation, talk to my father-in-law about the state of Seattle. You'll get some straight dope on how the people that live in Seattle feel about Seattle.
Wow.
But again, it's that whole thing where we have a city that has bent its will towards a populace that does nothing but fucking bitch and complain. And they bitch and complain, they change things, they relax all the laws, and what do they get? They get what they have now. You can't go into a public park in Seattle or any of the suburbs because it's not safe anymore. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't safe to take your children to a park. I mean, think about that. Think about the free society that we live in, and you can't take your children to a park. I mean, so anyway, I mean, it tells us we have to do something with our politicians, and we have to do something with accountability in the end.
Did you guys happen to see? Sorry to interrupt you there, Seth.
No, go for it.
Did either one of you happen to see the interview with that? I think it was the mayor of San Francisco he did last week about them cleaning up the city because they had these Chinese dignitaries coming into town.
Oh no. No, I didn't.
My God. It's just, if you can find that blurb, you can put it in the stuff across the internet because it's gold. He literally
Is
comes
it
in.
as good as? No, go ahead. Sorry.
It's short. It's one blurb. It's basically him on camera with all his entourage around him. And he says, they're saying that we're cleaning up the city because we have these important people coming into town and the city's a mess. And it is. It is. And that's why we're doing it. Like he just flat out says, he goes, my city's a shithole and I'm trying.
Well, I mean, but what else are you going to say? And the hard part is we've heard this so often that it's almost impossible to tell the people that are trying from the people that aren't apart. You almost can't anymore. They just roused a huge homeless camp in Minneapolis here. Came in with the bulldozers and the dump trucks and the roll-off dumpsters and said, it's all going. And the people are like, yeah, whatever. And it's like, we have these services, you can go here. And all the people went to the services, they got their new free stuff, and then they started building another camp 2 blocks down from the old one.
Oh, Newsom. I didn't know he was is he it's
Newsom's
Newsom.
a governor. Newsom is a governor.
Yeah. So Newsom, I got the clip here.
he was the one that said it. I couldn't remember who it was, but it's about San Francisco in particular.
Oh,
yeah, it's President Xi is visiting, and that's this is so much funnier now. All right, hold on. Yeah, I don't know what some of the solutions are to some things. Like, I stayed in Chicago for a while, just north of downtown, so really close to Wrigley Field. And you would walk out, and there was a clinic right nearby. Like, I think it was like you get blood work and this and that, but the city had designated it a clean needle area where they hand out needles. Now, again, I'm not dogging people with like severe problems, but I don't know if the solution is handing out a whole bunch of, because they were all over the floor. Like you go out there all over. It was like as common as cigarette butts used to be on the sidewalk. And I don't know what it doesn't seem like it's helped much, because it just seemed like it escalated the presence of it, because you could just do it comfortably and cleanly. I get that it is probably a definitely good thing to stop HIV transmission and all of that, but I don't know if I don't even know if there's a way to do it. But it's just interesting you mentioned that. Stuff across the internet. There we go.
well, it was something like that. What is the end goal? What is the end goal of a clean needle? It doesn't stop.
No,
Well, doesn't stop anybody from using drugs. Okay. Doesn't clean up the streets, as you just mentioned. And because I'll be honest here, I'm a smoker. When I'm done smoking, I knock the cherry off my cigarette. I make sure it's out and I put it in the garbage, because I don't want to make the street dirtier than when I walked down it. Okay. That's just what I do. But going one step further, I will tell you what I believe is, this is going to sound terrible, and again, edit at your will. The biggest mistake that we've made when it comes to the opioid crisis, and how we've dealt with it, our chosen reaction to it, I think the biggest mistake we made is the use of Narcan. I think it is the biggest mistake. When my wife and we took a vacation, we went to Hawaii for our anniversary. We walked from our hotel, which was in a very nice part of town, up to an even nicer part of town. My wife wanted to do some shopping. And in the walk to and back, we saw 3 different people being revived on a sidewalk with Narcan.
Oh, man.
And my thought is, why? Why would you take somebody that has no interest in life, no interest in being a productive member of society, and ultimately no interest in their own well-being, and revive them? Why? Let them die. Just let them go away. And then somebody who gets a paycheck has to come and pick them up. Somebody who gets a paycheck has to drive them to the morgue. Somebody who gets a paycheck has to give them an autopsy and tell everybody why they died. Somebody who gets a paycheck has to bury them in a pauper's grave. Why? Why keep these people going? I don't, and I'm not trying to sound like I have no compassion for my fellow humans, but this is one thing I truly don't understand. Why do we do that? Because you can go on YouTube and find videos of people being revived by Narcan. And it's like, what did you accomplish? Oh, we saved a human life. Well, yeah, for the next 30 minutes until they go out and find the next high and do it again. And again, I'm not trying to, like you said, I'm not trying to dog on people or trying to be so judgmental, but I just don't see the point. Because when it comes down to these things, if it's on a fire truck, guess what? You and I pay for it. If it's in a police car, you and I pay for it. If it's in a county-sponsored ambulance, you and I pay for it. So why are we paying to prolong the life of somebody who has no interest in being part of society anyway?
Well, I get what you're saying. I think there's a whole bunch of different interests. I think that like you said, like the people that are doing their job or the paramedics that respond do want to help. But I'm not saying this because I have no idea who manufactures it, but it wouldn't shock me if the people that made super clean pharmaceutical grade opiates also produced Narcan. That it get
They
got out
absolutely
of
do.
control.
They absolutely do.
Yeah. So like it's a problem they are profiting from, and it's a solution they're profiting from. It's like seems like a very I don't know. It seems like that exists in so many places in our current setup.
I think there is a conundrum there, though, because there's an inherent danger of accidental overdose on certain things, like fentanyl being so dangerous to even come in contact with topically and not just, ingesting it. So the fact that Narcan exists for the safety also of first responders and things is a real world thing. So it is a blessing in that sense. But at the same time, here's the conundrum: is those first responders also have, it's not the Hippocratic Oath, but they have that responsibility to preserve life. So they have to use everything at their disposal to, perform, basically, it's not triage really, but you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
The same thing that they carry on them for their own protection is also a tool that they have to use based on their oath they've taken to protect.
Yeah, the cop that was going through evidence, they got some fentanyl in the air that passed out in that video. They that's how they revived him.
Yeah, like I said, so it can be, I'm playing devil's advocate maybe there, but
I don't think you are, though. I don't think you are. I think what you're saying is completely legitimate. But that is somebody who is exposed to these things in the course of their duties. Okay. If you go out in the world and you buy a pill off a stranger and you put it in your mouth, I'm sorry, you get what you get. Okay. If I were to bring home a bottle of ibuprofen and spin the top off and the safety seal was punctured, guess what? I wouldn't take a single one of those fucking ibuprofen. Never.
Nope.
Okay. So, but that is a mentality, right? So if you live your life in a place where you go out and you will purchase things from people that you're going to put into your body, and these people are strangers and you have no idea where these things come from, sorry, you're rolling the dice, and sometimes it comes up snake eyes, and if you die, I'm sorry, I'm not coming to your funeral. I'm not. I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. Now, to your point about first responders, that's inarguable. I could not, in any way, shape, or form or universe, present a cogent argument of why we should not provide it to those people. What I'm saying is, why do we provide it to junkies who want to live on the streets and do all this shit and not, they don't have a vested interest in surviving anyway, so why keep bringing them back? That's the part that I struggle with, especially when I know that I have to pay for it.
I mean, definitely not the first person I've heard ask that question. So,
well, like I said, walking down the streets of the capital city of Hawaii, and I saw it three times in less than 6 hours. Okay.
well, a lot of the people I've heard make that argument are those first responders. So that's a thing in its own right where
But that's not even. It's
Yeah.
You're saying the why. Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I thought you were
Oh,
going
no.
more towards the why.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going with what you're saying. Like I've heard that more times from this is obviously what I guess you would call it water cooler talk at that point where, they're not going to go on record in front of the news and say that, but I hear it from them more than anyone, where it's actual first responders who are like, we revive people and they get mad and want to swing on us immediately because we, ruin their high. And it's like, you were dead 2 seconds ago, man. And like they come out of it, wide awake wanting to fight because they're now sober and angry. And, they hear it. Like I said, they probably say it more often than anyone I've heard make that argument. But
Well, at the same time, though, if you look at our society and we look at the people, and I live in Minnesota, right? So when Prince died, that was a big deal here. Like I work about a mile from Paisley Park. Okay. So when Prince died, I had trouble leaving work because there were so many squad cars and fire trucks and ambulances and news crews and whatever. And my wife and I were actually going out that night to see Corey Taylor do a solo show at First Avenue. And of course he opened up and he sang Purple Rain, and it was cool, and I was feeling the vibe, and our big 35W bridge was lit purple, and all the buildings in the city were lit purple. And then I thought about it later, and I'm like, we were glorifying a junkie. And it's like, why does our society do that? But I think it's a piece of what makes people putting a pill from a stranger in their mouth easier, because we glorify it. And I struggle a lot with that. We did the same thing with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was all great and whatever else. He was just a rich junkie. That's all. He was a super rich junkie.
That wasn't malpractice. I always assumed that was malpractice.
It's different because it was propofol. Propofol.
Okay.
Yeah. So that has to be monitored by the doctor. Now he was using it for sleep, and the doctor walked away and basically killed him. So
I didn't know that. I thought there was like some event or I don't know if I remember. I thought it was something to where it was administered by the doctor wrong. And then it's been forever since I even had that thought.
It's not how it's administered. It has to be monitored. So that's, as someone who literally just had that drug for the first time in their entire life 2 weeks ago when I had my medical procedure, I can tell you how it works now. And the second, and first off, I do not handle anesthesia of any type well. I don't handle side effects of any drug well. I don't take more than 2 Advil if I don't have to, because
I've seen him on melatonin.
Oh God, out. Yeah. I'm going to take one tonight after this, and I'll be out. I'll see you guys like next week. So yeah, when something says it has a side effect, I'm going to get it. So I'm very picky on the drugs that go in my body. And I had to get on this for the first time, and I told the anesthesiologist, I was like, hey, I don't handle this, I don't handle anesthesia well. And I was like, I've kind of done some research on this. And she's like, yeah. She's like, second this hits you, you're going to be out, and I'm basically going to watch you until the second everything's done. And then she's like, I'm going to literally cut the flow, and you're going to wake up thinking you just had the best nap of your life. I was like, okay.
So it's
Sure enough, that was it. Other than a little bit of like wobbly newborn legs where, I couldn't, like, I was like, whoa, okay. I mean, I was out 30 minutes up, fine. So, but it has to be monitored like that. And that's why he had a doctor in-house monitoring him. And that's why there was a malpractice suit on that, is because the doctor was not monitoring him. And basically put him into a coma he didn't come out of.
Now, is it a push? Like they're constantly pushing it, or it's like on a drip, or like, so it has to constantly be flowing for it to work?
No, they have, I mean, it's similar to regular anesthesia where they know based on like your like body weight and things like that. I think they know it's a timed thing. They know it's like going to be this much, and they can monitor that and figure out like, oh, he's running out. If he might wake up before the procedure's over. And they say, it's one of those things where if you wake up, you're not going to remember anyway, because they put you back out so quick. So yeah, it's a timed thing, but it's so fast acting, that drug in particular, that like the second it's gone through your system, like you're up again, you're away. As soon as they're not administering it anymore, like you're out. So it doesn't have like a half-life where it's like they tell you not to drive the rest of the day and into the next day, but that's like I mean, you're just gonna be groggy, because it's, like I said, similar to taking like a lot of melatonin or something. I mean, you're gonna have, if you take something for sleep and you only sleep 30 minutes, and you're gonna be like a little like, oh, that was nice. Can I keep going? can I nap a little longer?
Weird. And anesthesia creeps me out just in general. I've had it done twice. Once I was a kid, and it was like an oral surgery, because there was like in my lip, there was a vein that just stopped. Like it just grew normally, but it was like there's a term for it. It's like a dead end vein. Normally it's no big deal, but since it was in a certain place, like different times of the day, it would like, I would feel pressure or whatever. So they wanted to take it out. So I remember he wanted me to count backwards, and my mom, since I was like, I don't know how old I was pretty young, they wanted me to count backwards, and so I started to, and then I remember laughing, and then I remember my mom getting up going, don't. And then that was it. It was lights out. And then I woke up and apparently I acted a fool. I don't really know what I said. She wouldn't tell me. And then later I had impacted molars. I had to have taken out. And I don't like it because then I was like mature enough to be worried. Like, what is this? What's going to happen to my brain while, all those kind of questions. And it was just like folding time. It was like you're here and then you're awake and they just fold that time. And it's unbelievably creepy.
Oh, I can make it even creepier for you. The weirdest thing about anesthesia to me, and like I said, I've done probably an unnecessary amount of study into this for no reason at all. Just one of those rabbit holes we find ourselves constantly going down. That's why we do this show. Is we really don't know why it works. Like, they understand the drugs and they understand the effect it will cause on the human body, but they don't understand at a root cause how anesthesia works or why the body reacts the way it does to it. Like, there's no magic thing. That's why it's such a monitored professional job where it's like, oh, you're an anesthesiologist, this is what you do. They have the litany of drugs they've used over the years, and and new ones, like I said, constantly they're coming out with and stuff. But the why is still a mystery of the human brain, and that's what kind of makes it scary. Is we still don't know why the body behaves like it does under anesthesia. So that to me is the most.
I agree. That's
part.
creepy. That is.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, no, I completely agree. So 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, well, call it 2.5 years ago, I was building a fire pit in my backyard. And in the space of 3.5 seconds, I both exploded one of my vertebrae in my back and dislocated my knee. And the knee is actually the thing that hurts so bad. My knee was out of place, so I, like a genius, didn't have my phone in my pocket, so I had to crawl into my house, and being the stubborn Gen Xer that I am, I Googled how to fix it and fixed it myself. So fast forward about 2 months and my leg still hurts. Well, it turns out that I had blown out my back too, and basically had ruptured a disc, and then it was pushing on a nerve. And so long story short, I ended up having a back surgery, and it was glorious. I woke up and it was like, oh, look, my leg moves again, and I don't feel like I have to shit constantly, and all these other things. The one thing I learned about through this whole experience, so I had this surgery, I think it was on a Wednesday morning, and they told me, okay, we're going to give you these pills. And it was the one time in my life where I took hardcore narcotics because shit hurt. And they said to me, and I'll make it simple so we talk about it. By Saturday morning, if you haven't taken a dump, go to the emergency room. Okay. So Saturday morning, it's 7 o'clock, and I'm like, I'm not going to the fucking emergency room. There's no way. So I just screwed up my courage, and what I learned from this experience is that I would be a terrible heroin addict, because I don't ever want to see a 3-foot-long turd again in my life. Ever. Okay. So from that, after that day, the leftover pills I had, flushed them. Nope, we're done with those. I'll take some ibuprofen just to get through this. But I think that's for me, it's the crux of the whole thing. What do you do with people that are comfortable and enjoy a state of being or a state of existence where there's not much to it? It's just chasing the next dragon, right? And that's why I think Narcan, or that's his trade name. It's called naloxone. That's why I think it's one of those things where I think it gives too many people second chances. And just so we're clear here, I did a little bit of looking. If I'm reading my numbers right, Narcan as a product is somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion a year for the company that manufactures it. So I understand why they have a vested interest in it. I get that. But these are also the same companies that are selling the same drug that puts people into an overdose state anyway. So it's like, how do we as a society, let a company sell both the problem and the solution? It seems a little like, kind of double dipping to me. And I understand that we have young people and kids every day that go to a party and take a pill, and the next day they're a heroin addict. And it's like, okay, but it's like you made that choice. And it goes back to like, I would not put something like that up. You could not pay me enough to stick a needle in my arm or take a pill from a stranger. So, and to me, it's just common sense. So maybe I'm just a hard-nosed prick that just doesn't get the world. And I'll admit that that's a possibility. But I mean, why do we put so much effort into saving people that don't have common sense? I don't get it. We can move on before I just rant until
I'm gonna do one more kind of a throwback, because I had a question a while back, and like I said, it's a legitimate question here, and not a once again, not picking on anyone, especially if we have any listeners out there that have certain political leanings. I don't care. Like I said, I'm a jaded history major. I try to avoid politics at best if I can, but this is why I'm asking this question, is because maybe you guys have a better thumb on the pulse, I guess you could say, of this than I do. But I agree that so much of like these younger generations have, which I mean, like I said, I'm an older millennial, I guess is what they would call me at this point. So when you were saying stuff about millennials earlier, like all I could think was, yeah, we ruined punk and we made emo and metalcore out of this. So that's what I got out. That's what I got out of us being a lazy generation that had everything handed to us. But for these younger generations that are trying to like step up, be angry, do whatever, and try to like make a change or asking for it, but also have these wild expectations of like, what somebody should be making, like what you inherently should just be given just for doing a menial job or something. Why do you think it is that so many of them are attracted to the idea of communism beyond the scope of like the idea of, oh, well, if we take the rich and like we all just divide it amongst us, we'll be all fine. But like at its core, like why do you think so many of this younger generation are hooked on the idea of communism being the solution, but at the same time, that's a contradiction because they're so singularly, concerned about their own well-being or their own success. So they all want to be millionaires. They all want to have liberal arts degree and be a millionaire TikToker or something. But at the same time, they're subscribing to something where not all of them can be that. Or do they just want the time afforded to do that? I don't like, it's a legitimate question.
That's easy. That's so easy. Because young people now pick a political ideology like you and I go to Home Depot and pick out paint. Okay? Which one looks the best? That's all they do. They have absolutely no idea what it actually is, what it actually means, and ultimately what the consequences of being affiliated with such means. They have no idea. All these pink and blue haired fucking weirdos right now that are like, free Palestine and all this other stuff like that. It's like, do you have any idea that if you went to Palestine, they would fucking kill you? Do you know that? Like, they have no fucking idea. I mean, I took great set. So my wife and I drove through a pro-Palestine protest the other day. So my wife is from Seattle. She's a realist, but she leans a little bit left. And we're driving through this, and she's like, "Oh my God, don't do anything! Don't do anything!" And I'm like, define don't do anything. And she's like, "Just don't do anything. Don't say anything." And I'm like, "Well, pick one. Is it don't do anything or don't say anything?" She's like, "Don't say anything." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." So this was a 3-block long protest. I rolled my window down and just went for 3 solid blocks. That's all I did. And why? Well, because I get to, because I live in this country and I can do and say pretty much whatever I want. Now, did I stop the car? Did I get out? Did I accost somebody? Did I punch somebody? Did I scream in somebody's face? No, I didn't, because I'm a relatively civilized person, and I know that there's not room in the civil discord for things like that. There's just not. Now, Do I think that this country is increasingly getting to a point where we're going to get past that? Oh, yes, I do. But at the same time, it's like we have to be able to have a back and forth, and sometimes it's not always going to be fun, you know, and you have to see and hear things that you don't like. But in terms of the people these days, it's the same as it's been for the last 25 years, and it's just ever increasingly these people find their ideas and their ideologies, and they're on a needle point, right? And you have to be right there with them on their needle point, or they hate you and they don't agree with you, you know, and you're an ist, an ish, an ism, or whatever, you know, you do one of these things, and it has nothing to do with that. I fully support everybody on this planet being exactly who they are. I fully support it. Okay. That said, I'm not going to go to your parade. I'm not going to necessarily stand up for you in your time of need if I don't agree with you, because that's also my choice. And in the end, your happiness should not be pegged on whether or not I agree with you. You should just go and be happy. If you want to have a conversation with me, we'll have a conversation. Don't be surprised if I disagree. But I'm not going to walk away with my happiness being completely hinged on whether you agree with me or not. Because, and I've said this before, if we were all the same, life would be pretty fucking boring. We'd have nothing to talk about. Okay? But as far as people now trying to embrace things like fascism, socialism, communism, they do it because they get bullet points. That's all they get is bullet points. They don't get down into the root of what all these things actually are and how fundamentally negative they are. They don't bother with that. They see a video on TikTok that says, "Ooh, communism is cool." So that's what they do, and they latch onto it because they hear one thing that they agree with. Okay, well, I can latch onto liberalism in the United States and think of one thing that I agree with. I'm not a pro-lifer. I'm conservative as hell. I'm not a pro-lifer. I'm a pro-choicer. I also think that we should have the death penalty. I also think that you should pay your fair share of taxes. I also think you should have a job. I also think you should have freedom of speech, you know? So the reality of all this stuff is that nobody now is willing at all to meet in the middle. Nobody wants to meet in the middle anymore. People want to wave their flag and have you agree. And if you don't agree with them, you're racist, homophobic, you're some sort of ideologist, you're all this other things that have nothing to do with what the actual conversation is. And then moreover, honestly, nobody wants to have a conversation anymore. Nobody wants to do what we're doing. Nobody wants to sit and chat and hear what somebody else has to say and go, huh, and think about it. They just want to go, fuck you, you're a fascist, or you're this, or you're that. People want to just scream at each other. And I think it's really prevalent with the young people now. They just want to just yell and scream, you know? And hey, you know what? If you want to go out and dye your hair purple and look like you ran down a dock and fell face first into a tackle box, go ahead. I don't care. That's up to you. Okay? Just when someone says to you, hey, you're going to be in customer service and you're going to be facing our customer and that's not the look we want, don't be surprised and don't be offended. Just go, well, you know what? That's not going to work. I'll go somewhere else. You know, you don't have a right in this country to not be offended. And that seems like what the left, I think, seems to continually want to defend, is this right to not be offended. Okay. When I was coming up in high school, I had long fucking hair. I listened to metal. I wore a fucking jean jacket. I was offended every fucking day by the people that were like looking at me like, how come you're not cool? And for me, it was like, whatever, I don't care. You know, but I didn't go out and scream and just wave my fist in the air and, you know, go full blown Karen on people because they didn't want to listen to me. I just didn't give a shit, you know? And I'm the same way now. If you don't want to listen to me, fine. That's cool. But I want to listen to you. So when that moment comes where you want to talk, come and find me, you know? But it boils down to, Clark, for your question, it boils down to people not having enough information and clinging on to an ideology that they know next to nothing about. And moreover, not having a really well-defined definition of these things in history and where those things brought the various populaces and civilization in history and what they did to them. And it's easy to scream and shout, but we're also in a place now where the unfortunate part of the United States of America is that you're free to say whatever you want. You're free to scream and shout. But it's the people that are screaming and shouting now that are getting the attention, as opposed to the people that have solid ideas and a solid foundation on how to bring this country back to a place where it's a workable machine. Now it's just about, I want to be happy and I want to see rainbows and unicorns every day and I want to do all these other things. And it's like, that's just not real life, man. Most of it sucks. Most of living, even in this modern day society, isn't fun. Okay? So you just got to do your part, and then you got to carve out the little bits of fun where you can. And you got to be okay with that. And if you want to wake up every day and just have it be, everything served to you, everything handed to you, you don't have to put in any effort and everybody agrees with you, well, yeah, go ahead. Go to the Soviet Union or go to these places that you think have these things, and then let me know how it works out for you.
You unlocked a great memory, by the way, for me from college. One day we were on campus, and I was staying with a friend of mine, and we were walking out of one building and basically walking across campus to this other building, and this guy had taken up residence, I guess is the best way to call it. He had jumped up on a brick wall, and he had a little amp with him and a microphone, and he started like vehemently preaching about like sinners and how like just pointing out all these people and how like you're all going to hell, you're all going to hell. Like it was just one of those like real crazy over the top evangelistic things where it was like the guy wanted shock value. He wanted to get, he actually did have, there was a girl there with him that she was like filming off to the side. This was, early 2000s or mid 2000s, I guess you could say. But he was doing it for the shock value. He was trying to get a crowd riled up. He was wanting, that kind of reaction. The best part was my friend and I happened to walk up on it, and we thought it was interesting because the guy had just jumped up and just started ranting. And so we were like, oh, we're going to stop and see how this goes, because people are already filtering in and feeding into what the guy wanted exactly. They're like, how do you know? You don't know me, all this stuff and everything. And my buddy's smoking a cigarette. So we walk up and we're kind of off to the left wing of this guy. So his right, but like the left side of the crowd. We walk up and the guy's just pointing at people in the crowd, and he's just going off on like the things about you're all sinners and all this stuff. And he looks all the way over, and me and my friend are standing there, and he points directly at my friend and goes, You are a smoke-sucking masturbator. and my friend has a cigarette still in his hand, and he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah, he knows me." Like, have I met this guy?
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, those shock rock pastors. Yeah, it's a very specific brand. Yeah, we don't have a lot of that anymore. Like the protesters outside of like concerts and stuff. It seems like that's whittled down quite a bit. There was that not that I think they're I think they're lunatics. Who is the ones that were always out with the signs in the news last decade?
The whole family, I can't remember their name now.
It was like the something church. I forget what it was.
Oh, the Westboro Baptist.
That's
yep.
Yeah, they're the last ones that I heard. But like late 90s, early 2000s, that was way more common to see. Or like some kind of a that side's protest. I don't know. I think, to your point, I think that if you got what it has everything to do with what Brent was saying, is that if you got us like a generation below us or me, and then you were to like go Marxism, socialism, and communism, they wouldn't be able to differentiate the three. And the other thing is we haven't seen any conflict. Well, forget about wars, just conflicts, just some kind of like thing where two ideologies and one is suffering, one is not, or whatever, like tons of countries are going through currently. We haven't even seen like some crazy opposition in our lives, and them even less so. And then it goes, remember our talk with Kilgrid where he's basically, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the way I understood it was he has the belief that, and I would agree with him, that a certain ideology has co-opted a certain style or aesthetic or whatever. It's like, why do you go into any art college and everyone thinks politically identical? It's like that kind of a thing. And I think that there's reasons for that. He had like way better points than I could make. But it's interesting. I don't know. It's an interesting phenomenon. But I think it does boil down to the basics where they just don't know what they're talking about. And I don't know if you feel this way, Clark, but it's like when in high school, like our country has an identity issue of any multiple types. And it's like everyone that's loud enough that wants to say whatever or attribute some attribute to them or ideology or whatever it is. It's almost like the way like people kind of broke themselves up to identify themselves in high school. Like you'd get into a high school population, you'd be like, I'm going to be like this. I got to like choose like a camp or whatever. And it's like almost like that spilled out because I don't really recognize it outside of that. It's spilled out of high school and like everyone is just concerned about identifying whatever way. And it's kind of bizarre to me, but I don't know. I don't know the answers.
I don't either, because like even for me, like just thinking about growing up, you know, predominantly in the 90s for me. I mean, I was born in the 80s, but predominantly guess growing up in the 90s, we never had anything to rally behind. It felt like we were really, you know, living with rose-colored glasses during that time. Like, you know, yeah, we were like jaded. We had our music and everything. That was it. But it wasn't like there was nothing really going on. And then like I was a senior when 9/11 happened, and then all of a sudden, like things seemed more important all of a sudden. Like that was the country got its like, you know, got its ass in gear, and like everyone all of a sudden was like together for a minute, and like it became a thing. So like, so I don't know. Maybe it's just weird for my generation to feel like it was kind of blissfully cruising through growing up, and then, you know, this happens, and we get the, you know, the forever war, and then now the generation who grew up after that happened and didn't understand or didn't have that, I guess, I don't want to like misrepresent this, but you know, I'm not gonna say they didn't have an idea of why it was happening, but like they just weren't there to see the before and after. You know what I mean? Like it's weird to think like one of those defining kind of moments where it's like the world was this before and the world was not going to be the same after kind of moments.
Yeah, it's like Pokemon and soccer practice. And then,
I do it with Final Fantasy all the time. I'm like, there's Final Fantasy 7. There's Final Fantasy before it, and there's Final Fantasy after it, and they're completely different. Like it's a completely different aesthetic. So, like, yeah, things like that. It's just weird. I think if you were born after that time, you know, maybe, like I said, they just have a different understanding of like, you know, and like I said, maybe it's just words. It's like, oh, if I have something to latch onto, or maybe it is just, you know, like we'll use this word or this ideology as a front, like it's our banner, you know. I mean, yeah, it's been done before.
I think it's a mix of all that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, we don't really have to understand what it means. It's just going to be our banner to wave to, you know, until the message is brought. I mean, because if you really think about it, with a lot of that stuff, like you were saying earlier, Marxism, socialism, communism, what are the differences? A lot of those countries, that's all they did. They just used it as a banner to get, you know, I mean, a lot of quote unquote communist countries, I mean, that was a running joke for the longest time was if you didn't get American help, you just claimed you were communist, so the Soviets would send you stuff. It's what Vietnam did. It's what, you know, what China did. Yeah. It's pretty much like that was your thing. Like, it's like, oh, well, you know, we need help to fight our own war. We don't care. We have our end goal. The end goal matters. What we need is the backing. We need the money. We need weapons. We need supply. We need help. So if that's what it takes, then, you know, cool. I'm like, cool. We're here. I'll wave a red flag for a little bit, and then you look at it afterward and it's like, that's not what those countries are. I mean, you know, Vietnam, is a completely capitalist communist country. I mean, so it's like you look at stuff like that and you're like, what? I mean, what were they really doing? Like, or why is that? Why was it ever a threat? Because it really just came down to who was actually going to support their cause and give them the money and the tools to do it. And that's the only reason they even got, Soviet support is because America wasn't going to let them go. It became a proxy war. It became nobody's proxy war. That's the problem with when people look back at Vietnam and don't understand. Vietnam ultimately was a war for the Vietnamese. I mean, because at the end of the day, what did it really change that once they were unified,
Now, okay, you're talking about Vietnam. I can finally ask you this because you would be the one that would know the most. In Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin, was that a false flag that got us, like, the U.S. involved?
It would probably be considered false flag by today's definition. I would call it a convenient misunderstanding.
But it was still used as an excuse to just. What was the ultimate?
It was used to push it. It was definitely used to push it, but
okay.
It was, like I said, more of a convenient understanding than an outright false flag. I think it was just like a, hey, we can use this.
And did Jim Morrison's dad have anything to do with it?
Jim Morrison's dad.
So I've heard a convincing argument. It's been a while ago. That Jim Morrison's dad was involved in that misunderstanding. Now, I don't. The people that believe this think that it somehow means something. Like there's stuff in their music that signify the processing of that or whatever. I'm not saying that. I was just wondering if that was factually accurate.
I would have to look into some theories on that and then do the research.
Because that's one I don't want to let go of, but I will be willing to if it's completely fake.
I'll look into that. I wouldn't mind doing an entire episode of not historical myths necessarily, but smaller nuances of conspiracy theories behind historical things.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those are very fun. Not completely outrageous ones, but some that are just on the fringe of being okay, that's fun. And not saying it changed anything, but true enough to make it more unique than we take it, than we give it credit for.
Okay. Well, all right. So we're an hour and a half into this, and this is a nice, just mishmash conversation. I do think that you brought up 9/11, and what better way to wrap this up than to talk about Tower 7? No takers.
I like the theories. The theories are fun on that, but man, still at the end of the day, there was so much going on. I still think that building fell just because of everything that was happening. There was a whole lot
radio
of falling down on it.
Everything I know as an engineer, tells me that building fell because of heat fatigue. That's why it fell.
Heat fatigue. Okay.
And a shit ton of steel coming out from the buildings on top of
so
it.
It's not that jet fuel or because it's Tower 7. The argument was that the diesel backup generators from the substructure ignited from all of the craziness going on across the street. That's what I've heard. And so I'm not arguing if whatever. Heat can absolutely compromise steel with a huge load on it. But so that's the verdict of people that know engineering is that the steel was compromised because of significant heat. It doesn't mean it has to melt it though.
Well, since Tower 7 wasn't directly hit. Yeah. We're talking about proximal heat. It is close enough.
Okay.
Tower 7 is extremely close to where Towers 1 and 2 were. So not only did it take, like I said, a proximity kind of fatigue, but it also took all of that steel from when the towers actually fell crashing down on it. And we're talking about what it was a 13-story building versus how big Towers 1 and 2 were. Like I said, that is a lot of weight, a lot of things coming down on it. My only extension to that theory, if I gave any credence to it at all, it would have been basically death blown like finished off by a demolition. If they did something like that, I would understand that they did it out of safety because it wasn't going to survive no matter, either way. I don't think they would have. I don't think they, if there was any demolition involved, it wasn't doing to hide something or cover up what was on the top floor and all that stuff. I think it would have been out of safety, if anything. And even if that building had stayed standing throughout all of that, they would have had to probably drop it anyway.
Okay. Now, because there were that weird garbled radio feed that because this is before we went to digital band. This is back analog days. I can't remember if it was the CNN live view or if it was like NBC. I forget which one, but there was clearly the words "pull it" right as I think it was Tower 7 when it fell. Now I'm just saying that was something that's there. So like if I'm not saying it wasn't, I'm not saying it was or wasn't. I'm just saying if it was, that would make sense. They had to like quickly do something. The other question I have is I've seen photos of what is this? Is this diagonal? What is this? Is that a diagonal cut?
Yeah.
Angled cut. So like I saw there's like when the rubble was being cleaned, the reports of the molten steel that were still pooling was days and days later, and the angle cuts on the core beams. That's like I've heard people argue thermite and intentionally cut things so it would implode properly on its way down.
So thermite doesn't burn like that. Okay. Thermite does not burn like that. A shape charge can cut a straight line, but it also doesn't burn like that. Contextually, I know what you're talking about. And most of those photos were taken after the building had fell, and they were cutting steel to try to get to survivors. So it's content.
That makes
thermite.
sense.
Thermite tends to burn super hot, but super messy. Okay, it does not burn straight lines and things like a cutting torch would.
Right.
And a shape charge will definitely blast like that. But it also does not leave a straight line. It starts out as a nice straight line and then turns into a big cone as it goes out. Okay. So I've seen those things. Yeah. It's, I'll say this for the conspiracy theories. I understand it. And it makes me happy that people are thinking. Okay. I think you're wrong, but I'm happy that people are thinking. And the reason I think that you're wrong is that if this same government orchestrated this giant catastrophe so they could justify going to a war in the Middle East, this is the same government that it took them 5 fucking days to get water to Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina. Okay? Our government is far too inept to orchestrate something like this. Okay? Because I think at the time of Hurricane Katrina, if I had been the president, I would have called up the Aquafina company and said, look, if you don't divert every single truck you have on the road to New Orleans right now, tomorrow there's a $10 bottle per $10 per bottle tax on bottled water. Get it going. Okay. So I can't for a second believe that our government has the chutzpah to put and form a plan like that, because they are so inept every single day. And as much as they serve to beautify and glorify themselves and everything that they do, there is no way that many agencies could have come together to do one fucking thing. Look at Waco, look at Ruby Ridge. Okay, there's no fucking way. Okay, and on a scale that grand, our government does not have the aptitude to do something of that scale. It just does not. We can't even exit a war from a country in an orderly manner. We can't do it. So
no, those are good points.
To perpetrate something that, a catastrophe on this scale. And I mean, and to be perfectly honest, there are far too many photographs, videos, evidence, just all these things where you see airplanes hitting.
Oh, I'm not arguing. I've never argued the plane not being there.
I can't. Yeah. And you know what? And if there was a demolition of a building and people have audio of it, from my chair, it's probably recorded audio of them bringing down in a controlled manner, bringing down a building that had already been damaged. And it's very easy to take something and misconstrue it as something else because you don't have context. You see, you get 7 or 8 seconds of thing and someone goes, see? And it's like, well, okay, what did the other 50 seconds of the track sound like? Did it sound like 2 guys talking about a controlled demolition and then somebody sounding a siren and we cleared the area and then we collapsed the building? So, I mean, it's,
no.
Well,
but
that's the thing,
again,
too.
I still
about
love
the
that people are thinking. That's what I love.
About the jargon too, with the pull it thing. Like people take that one little snippet where they heard it like over camera or whatever, picked it up. I forget if it was a news camera or what, but they hear the pull it comment, and immediately people jumped on that and said, "Oh, well, that's jargon. That's demolition. That's common demolition jargon for." And it's like that's not common
It's not.
jargon
It's
for
not.
any like.
Nope.
This isn't like signals that are agreed upon by any kind of like organized.
A guy saying pull the like that particular feed and go to a next one that was in the newsroom.
What I had heard after this was one of the guys that came forward and said, "Yeah, that's my voice," was one of the fire chiefs that was on site, and he was telling people to get out. He was telling his guys. He said, "Pull it." That was his signal to his guys. So within his crew, that was jargon. But he was telling
everybody out.
He was saying, "Yeah, we can't. We got to go."
To pull the crew. Yeah. Demolition experts. I mean, people want to think that they're cowboys. They're not. It's a very controlled environment with a very controlled result. And yes, I've seen YouTube videos where demolitions don't go the way that they're supposed to. I get that. Well, you know what? And sometimes you can't control every single variable. But they're not guys with 6 shooters that are just wrapping dynamite around shit and just going yeehaw and lighting a fuse and running for it. Okay, it's just not how it works. And it doesn't work that way because if you had a business doing that and you killed a bunch of people, you wouldn't be in business very long. You just wouldn't,
Well, with conspiracy theories, I've always been someone that it's like I'm putting on my PJs, I'm stoking the fire. It's such a cozy endeavor to get on like conspiracy. Dude, man,
I love them. I absolutely love them because, like I was going to say this earlier, but this is a great bounce back to what we were talking about. I love people that are thinking. The thing that we don't have these days, the thing that has taken us to the place we are in our society, is the lack of free thought. Nobody is forming an original opinion or forming an original idea anymore. Nobody. People are glomming on to something that they saw on YouTube or Instagram or God for fucking TikTok, and they just cling on to it, but they have no information. They don't bother to do any research. Like when I talk to you about conspiracy theories, the thing that I know about you is you've done research and you do that. And that's what I appreciate about you. And if you hit a dead end, then we talk about it, and it's like, well, but you are also smart enough to know that, like, I know that there are things in your life that I have no idea about and you can teach me things. Okay. But you're also smart enough to know that you don't know everything. So you ask questions, but that's what our society is not doing anymore. Nobody's asking questions. People are just making assumptions, and they're going out and they're bitching and they're protesting and they're blocking traffic and doing all these things based on an assumption. And for me, that is the stupidest way to spend your time. If you want to feel passionate about something, I'm all for it. Talk, speak, scream if you have to, but know what the fuck you're talking about when you do it.
Well, there you have it. That's Evan Weird solved 9/11. What was the other thing we solved, Clark? It was the weird castle that the monk guy took over or built, the rich guy, and it had like demons on it. Huh?
Yeah.
And then we solved. It was like we figured out that aliens and demons are the same thing, and the Catholic Church has put a lid on it for like eons. We solved that one too. I forget what the castle was called.
Yep. That's the I guess you'd call it some monastery castle-esque thing. Yeah, Rennes-le-Château, in the south of France.
That's it. That's the word that I don't remember. Yeah. Oh. Well. Doing hard work over here.
Yeah, we're doing the people's work here.
Hey, well, all of that 9/11 talk aside, the one thing that just drives me nuts, at the very least, there's something about the official narrative that I'm just like, no. Like let's say in hindsight, the 9/11 commission is made, all of this stuff. The fact that they get like first off, these planes that went into the things like are obliterated, and then on a sidewalk, I believe it was in the hearing, they enter into evidence one of the hijackers' passports that like was not even singed. Like there's like so many things, and I mean, I'm aware that the government, like you're talking about, has trouble coordinating, or it's just this big bulky thing no one can keep a secret. But like what my mind goes to is that they just like came up with nice clean answers to move forward or something. There was a whole lot. I don't know, even the idea that these hijackers had like, man, we're on the dot for 2. Supposedly, I mean, I've seen photos of plane wreckage, and in Pennsylvania, that scorched earth area, there's like no like noticeable plane fuselage debris. That was kind of weird. And I'm just like reporting on things I think are strange and incoherent, like the fact that there's just like scorched, ditchy like field in Pennsylvania, the fact that the Pentagon, the most like secure thing in the world, has like 2 frames of whatever hit it. Like there's just some stuff in it that is like, it might just be the government trying to exit this stage cleanly, and the people aren't freaking out. I don't know.
Well, I think you solved your own mystery there, because that's exactly what it is. Because remember what I just said a while ago, people who grew up in the 90s before 9/11, you had this, I don't know, idealism of invincibility, because when the World Trade Center attack happened in the 90s, before that, it was in 94 or when Clinton was in office, nobody cared. 93, 93, 94, I couldn't remember. I was 10 years old at the time. Yeah, like, I mean, nobody worried about that. Nobody cared. I was more scared of the Ebola outbreak that somehow someone made it back to Washington, D.C. with Ebola. I was more scared that was a thing than terrorist. Nobody, I mean, like I said, it just wasn't on anyone's radar like you think it was at the time. We were going about our lives, not worried about terrorism as a thing we were ever going to encounter. And then you have 9/11, and I think the answers we were given, and a lot of the stuff that, even if it seems, it doesn't seem plausible with some of the video evidence, because we are tainted by media, we're tainted by movies, we're tainted by the things we watch, and we don't actually have a very good grasp on actual engineering wrecks, what they look like. Second off, yes, what the answers we were getting probably were to just clean up, let's move on and get to the next thing, because your government failed you. You thought we were invincible, and we're not invincible, and they just proved that. And that was the easiest way out, honestly.
Okay. I can get down with that.
I'll tell you what, for your number of frames for the Pentagon, think about this for a second. So first of all, the camera that was outside the Pentagon that caught that was a really, really shitty, outdated camera. So frames per second versus speed of an airplane. Okay. Then also think about the location. You have one of the most heavily guarded, heavily protected locations in there. There's not a lot of gas station cameras and whatever else that are on there, and that's on purpose. So I've been to the Pentagon, and now granted, it was by accident because my wife and I were trying to go somewhere else, and we ended up. Turns out from our hotel, you could not walk over to the National Cemetery there from where we were. We ended up in the Pentagon, and we ended up stuck. And guys with guns told us we were going the wrong way and we should leave. Okay, but it's a huge, vast area, but there's no gas stations, there's no homes, there's no places that would have, because where's the other cameras? Because that's what we expect these days, right? Other cameras. In this place, it is so vast, there are no other cameras. They just don't exist.
Okay.
As far as the plane crashes go, okay, it's easy. Controlled descent versus uncontrolled descent. Okay. Planes that crash that have chunks left over were generally in a controlled descent. Somebody was trying to save as many people as they could. In an uncontrolled descent, like a plane hitting a building, that's taking an airplane and trying to fly it through a cheese grater. Okay. With beams and windows and stairways and elevators and things like that. It's not impossible to imagine that it was effectively vaporized. These things are not meant to fly through buildings. They're meant to fly through the air.
What I specifically meant was the field on that one. No, I get you on
Okay,
that.
so that was an uncontrolled descent, right? That was a bunch of passengers having taken over the plane and fighting for control of it, and it went nose first into the ground, at 500 miles an hour. It doesn't surprise me that there were not very, very many big chunks left over. There weren't, seats and rudders and tails, okay? Because physics and engineering, so,
Okay.
but again, these are the things that people don't do the research on. They don't, if you want to see the anatomy of a plane crash, there's a great video of a plane being crashed in the desert because the company wanted to see what a controlled crash actually looked like. They took a plane, they tried to land it without the landing gear because they knew it would crash and they wanted to see what it would look like. And when all was said and done, there was a big fire, but there were lots of large pieces of the airplane left because it was a controlled descent, even without landing gear. Okay. So put that against an airplane going straight into the ground because passengers had revolted and were fighting against terrorists and weren't having it, because all the indications were is that plane was headed for the White House, so explanations are not that far away if you think, research, and form reasonable hypothesis. Now, again, I still like that people think, and I still like that people like to reach, because that's our spirit as Americans. We like to think and we like to reach. And I think we should never stop doing that. There is a point where you get, I think as an average, reasonable person, you get an overwhelming amount of information and you go, yeah, that's probably what happened. And then you go on and you reach for the next thing, because I do that too. I love conspiracy, man. I do. I absolutely love it. But there is a point in my brain where I'm satisfied and I move on to the next one.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question for both of you. Did Donald Rumsfeld own the main manufacturer of drinks and sodas that went to the soldiers that were in the Gulf War? That's one I'm trying to figure out.
I mean, there's
So what I've heard is that he was was at least on the board of a company that was the main supplier for specifically drinks, is what I've heard. I haven't heard rations or anything, but I've heard specifically drinks. And in my mind, it makes sense. The Bushes, they've all known each other for so long. If there was like some weird business dealings and this and that, I could kind of see it.
I mean, it would be the best insider trading ever if you think about it, because the military is going to get the cheapest. Like, they're going to get the cheapest route ever anyway. So I'm just throwing it out there for like rippets. That's what we know the military uses today and everything like that. Do you ever see those in gas stations ever? Very, very rarely. So it's like, most people, you tell them like, oh, do you have a rippet? And they wouldn't even know what that is. And that's the energy drink that they supply to the United States military. Who owns that? I couldn't tell you. But
well, okay, I can actually argue that point. Again, the place that I work, we have military contracts. Our industrial might sell for $40,000. Okay. When it sells to the government, because of all the bullshit we have to go through to make all of their rules and regulations, it sells for $500,000. Okay. So the government does not always go for the cheapest solution. That is a complete and utter myth. They absolutely do not. It's the old adage of the $20,000 hammer and a $30,000 toilet seat. Okay.
yeah,
They don't do that. As far as that goes, well, I mean, talk to Dick Cheney and Halliburton. I mean,
Yep.
the government and the cronyism and the good old boys clubs, I mean, they're alive and well. They always have been. So to think for a second that somebody is not going to reach out to a friend and go, hey, I know that you own this company that makes X and we're trying to solve problem Y. What do you have for us? I mean, that's always existed. But you know what? As a reasonable person, I know it exists. And even though I think we overpay for a lot of that shit, I think it's a publicly traded company that probably has stock, and there's a lot of Americans that probably their 401k invests in some of that stock. And, in times of war, the average middle class person makes a little bit more money in their 401k, and that's the machine, man. That's the machine. I
Also,
can't.
I was going to jump back to Vietnam real quick too. This is one that I've never really studied in, but it's a great conspiracy theory, and maybe we can bring it up on a future episode if it actually has any validity. But it just reminded me of it. Talking about this was it Lyndon B. Johnson's father-in-law was someone high up in either Colt or Armalite. I can't remember who he had ties with. He either had ties with Eugene Stoner and Armalite, or it was Colt, and he was the one that bought the pattern so that Colt would manufacture the rifles for the U.S. military. But I'd always heard that. So Lyndon Johnson, technically, by keeping the war going, was making like his wife, essentially his family, because it was like his father-in-law, he was making like a ton of money.
Okay. Huh. I haven't heard that one. That's interesting.
Yeah, it
I'm
was.
trying to think of any more.
There's something to do with familial ties, and I could have sworn it had something to do with his wife's, like I think it was father-in-law or whatever. But yeah, I'd have to brush up on that one. So I'm not stating that one as fact. That's something that would be worth looking into, though.
Yeah, there was one company named Solyndra that I've heard of. It was during the Obama administration. But
The solar company. The solar company.
Yeah, that was like kind of like not real, but kind of real at the same time. And a lot of the pallets of different equipment was overbought but never used. Like there's so much weird stuff. I wonder how much. I bet like every 3 years there's something pretty bigger than Solyndra that we've not even heard of that is just like collecting dust somewhere, if a product even exists for that matter. Very interesting. I remember, who was it? Was it Reagan that like tore off all the solar panels? There was someone, a previous administration installed solar panels. They weren't very good. They were like these big, bulky, inefficient things to make more or less a point on different types of energy. And then I can't remember if it was his administration that tore it out or what. There's so much we need to have like a roster of American politic like weird events and like have an outline and do like
while we're doing general discussion here anyway, let's plan for a president's episode where we just go through the best.
I will be there. I will be there if we can
conspiracy.
vote on best haircuts again. So
I'm down for all. We'll give a lot of people some awards.
I'm dressing like Abe Lincoln. I'm dressing like Abe Lincoln, top hat and all, and I'm gonna let the world know that he was a fucking Republican.
We'll make up awards for each. I love that. Yeah, definitely need to do award ceremony.
We all got to.
So wait. Do you...
We'll have to all have like one prepared as like a personal favorite and why, and for what ridiculous reason it's your favorite president.
All right, I'm down.
Sounds all right.
We could do like a double one next weekend. Probably we could do that and Golden Fleet if you want.
Oh man, we could double up if we want to try and knock two out. But yeah, that'd be. I mean, we do either.
I think Golden Fleet's going to be, because I got questions. So
yeah,
I think Golden Fleet's going to be a longin'. If you know what I mean.
So that might be a full day's work there, but.
Yeah, the president's is going to be. We should do that like around the 4th of July. That's what we should do.
Or President's Day. We got February coming up. So.
Yeah, I'll have some time between Valentine's Day and my anniversary. I'll have lots of. No, I won't. I'm lying. I won't have lots of free time. But for sure, yeah. No, presidents would be fun. There's so many. Just so many characters and so many. I think about, so I live in Minnesota, and I think about when Jesse Ventura was elected governor here, and even I was like, holy shit, and people were like, oh, this is so, and it's like, do you guys not know this was not the first time that an actor was elected to a public office? Like, do you guys not know? Anyone heard of Ronald Reagan? Like, come on.
Or Gerald Ford.
Or Gerald Ford, yep. So, I mean, that's one of those ones where we almost might have to pick like a century, like go favorite of the century, because it could get. I could talk for a while I could definitely talk for a while.
Man, Ronald Reagan's one-liners were just so good. They were so good. Like even if you hate him, like at least admit the guy was pretty great at one-line jokes, or like a good dry setup. I've seen so many. No, go ahead.
I loved his there was a little boy outside of a voting station, and he was selling Democrat puppies, right? And then a few hours later, the people came by and he was selling Republican puppies, and people were like, "Well, those are the same puppies," and he's like, "No, now they have their eyes open." Like, oh, that was so priceless.
Oh man, wasn't he like I feel like in like a quick shot at like after what's his name did that assassination attempt, didn't he do like a "you should see the other guy" thing? They were like asking him how he was, and he was like, "You should see the other guy." It was just like stuff like that. He was like so good on his feet with a.
I know
he
did the one he did in, was it in Germany or whatever, when the balloon popped?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes, "You missed me." And I was like, just the balls on that dude, having been shot at before and still had a sense of humor about it.
Oh man. Who was it? I can't remember if it was Reagan or not, but there was a good joke about poisoned wine. He was like with a dignitary in I want to say it was somewhere in your and they were like, and the guy was like waiting to like watch him drink it, and then he made a joke about that. There's like a bunch of just YouTube videos you can watch. I don't remember them by verbatim, and I'm butchering them, so
Churchill had a great quote. It was I can't remember whose wife it was, but it was another member of Parliament's wife who they despised each other, like they hated each other with a fiery passion. And she told Churchill when they were at a party, like where everyone was together, she's just like, "If I say, Mr. Churchill, if I was your wife, I would poison your drink." And he said to her, he said, "If you were my wife, I'd drink it."
Oh, good stuff, man. Speaking of weird dry setups, I miss Norm Macdonald. That guy, what was it? The president. What is it when they do like some comedian comes up and it's like president's dinner or whatever?
The roast.
It's like
the big roast.
Yeah. Norm did it for Clinton, and it was so funny. It was hilarious because it was like young Norm too, but man, it was a guy that was like dedicated to like the funniest pathway to a joke. It was just the best. I don't know. I wish they hadn't have released his that last, because I just, no one, like from what I've absorbed of his philosophy, he would not have liked them to release that when he was sick. That Netflix went ahead and released this last special, and he's like clearly ill, and he's like doing this stand up on a webcam. I don't know who it was for. I don't know if it was just practice. I don't know if he was doing it for a friend or if he was like trying stuff out with the execs at Netflix. But I can't help but to think he would have absolutely hated that being his last special. But whatever.
Well, that's the dignity thing we've been talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Going on.
I feel like someone in, I think I know what you're saying now. But I do feel like someone in Netflix just kind of like took it and was like, "We're going to use this anyway."
Well, somebody signed something and they legally could, but that's where it kind of like the limitations get a little blurred. I think where like you sign something, but nobody has any compassion or personal investment in something. And like somebody like Norm Macdonald, who was a great comedian, but he was also a human being, right? I mean, and so when you get to the end of something like that, and I would hope that as a human being, whatever it is that I'm doing at the time that I'm dying, whatever thing that it is that I love, I hope I'm still able to do it. But if it's not fit for global consumption, I hope somebody has the common sense to just go, no. Let the person go out with some fucking dignity. And I think in our world right now, between the people that are screaming and bitching, between the people that are bitching back at them, between the people that are caught up in the traffic jams and the whatever, just trying to get to work, it's like it doesn't seem like anybody has any dignity anymore. And I want everybody to have their voice heard. I think people just need to stop and take a second and go, is this the place that I need to be loud? And a lot of people don't do that anymore. And, you know, I mean, like I grew up with Norm Macdonald on SNL. That was my era. And, you know, it's to watch some of these things and to watch some of these people. I see right now, I call it a respect. I don't even know what the fuck you want to call it, but Bruce Willis right now with what he's dealing with. I am so surprised that his family is not putting out an Instagram picture every single day. I'm so surprised that they're not. But at the same time, it sort of makes me appreciate them a little bit more. Maybe they're not the assholes that I think that they are. That, I mean, there's an interest. There's societal interest in Bruce Willis. Okay, he is a person of pop culture fame. He is. But like I think it was this week I saw a picture that one of them had put out, and my first thought was, fucking how dare you? But then my second thought was, when I looked at the picture and what it was actually a very respectful moment. You know, it was just, I wasn't, when I sat down and thought about it and looked at the picture, I wasn't pissed. I was like, yeah, that's kind of how it is, because I think about like how my dad went. I think you guys know that my dad died of Alzheimer's. And to think that, like, I'm torn, because to think that like Bruce Willis, the badass that I knew from growing up, is dying of Alzheimer's is not the easiest thing to digest. Now, does it matter in my life? Fundamentally, no, it doesn't. But it's still a person who was paramount to my growing up and being who I am, and to liking the movies that I like, and to, you know, my connection to pop culture and to what it is. And to see that his family is, I think, at least trying to do it with a little bit of dignity, but also still giving us a little bit of information. I'm surprised, and I appreciate the fact that they're trying to give him a little bit of respect as he, you know, kind of takes his steps towards the bridge.
Yeah. Well, I can get down to that. I do gotta go. I have to make a call real fast. But it was good seeing you guys. I'll see you guys. I'll talk to you pretty soon.